Welcome to the Spiritual Hangout. I am Leslie Damai, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about light workers and shadow workers. Where do you fall under the spectrum, and is there a perfect balance? All right, so why should you care about shadow work? Before we get into shadow work, I think it's really important for us to also address light work. Now, there needs to be a fine balance when it comes to these two practices, these two ways of being. And first and foremost, a light worker is someone that is able to carry light with them in the darkest places. And the way they gather this light is by embodying the light, is by becoming the light. They're able to access their highest, truest, purest form. And this takes a lot of practice. It is a true gift to do that. Now, most of the light workers that we're seeing in the spiritual community, they're actually finding their light externally. And the problem with that is when you are finding any sort of frequency externally, there's a debt to pay. You don't just get something for free. If you're not generating it yourself, there's going to be an unequal exchange many times. And so, for example, what comes up must come down. If you're writing a high frequency energy that's from the external world, then you're gonna have downfalls just as quickly as you're able to peak. And this can become a really dangerous behavior because you start to become dependent on those chemicals that are released. It's almost like a drug. And so when I started my spiritual journey, I noticed this happen to me because I was finally able to really work with my energy to a certain degree, but I was noticing that I was relying on the external to do that. So I would seek things that made me feel pleasurable all the time. And like I said, you're going to feel like just on top of the world. You're going to feel like you can fly, but that's not sustainable. That's not a sustainable frequency. So what happens is to hold on to that, you avoid anything that is not of that frequency. So for example, a lot of people who, are spiritually bypassing, let's say, they are deflecting, they are ignoring, they are repressing and suppressing anything that can possibly cramp their style, cramp their high vibe style. And that is a big issue because that is when we begin to neglect our shadow sides, our shadow self. And we how can you be a true light worker if you cannot hold light for your own darkness? And so that is what I wanted to indicate in this video is if you consider yourself a light worker, please be advised that if you do not face your own shadows, how the hell are you going to face anybody else's? And how are you then actually a true light worker? So first, we must generate self-compassion for ourselves and full acceptance, putting fear aside. And the way you do that is by conquering your shadows. And that's where shadow workers come into play. Now, I consider myself a shadow worker, but when I started my spiritual journey, I was most definitely a light worker. As a little girl, I went out in public to make, my whole goal as a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old when I would go out was to make people smile. I still remember that. I was the little girl you see in the backseat of the car who waves at people and makes funny faces just so that you can see them smile. I was a light worker. I was doing this because I had the ability to emanate positivity, radiate light that way, and at that time, that's the way I did it. I was just the sweetest little girl who loved to see other people happy. And that is coming from a true, genuine place. When you become spiritually enlightened and you're able to reach states of nirvana and you are completely balanced and you have worked through all of your fear, you can reach that state again. I mean, for children, it's easy because they're so unfiltered. They're just coming, they're just this new consciousness on earth. They're still not tainted. They're still not as programmed. But most of the shadows you're going to encounter are going to be programs. And that is why if you cannot address your own shadow, how can you help anybody else address theirs? You can on a superficial level, but you cannot actually show them something that you've never accomplished yourself. Now, most of us do conquer a lot of shadows. But what happens is when you get in the light worker phase, you tend to want to just completely ignore that. And so you'll go from light worker to shadow worker, light worker, shadow worker, and that's just another bipolar relationship. So it's really important to learn how to hold both roles or ways of being. It's not a role, it's a way of being. It's a lifestyle, it's a practice, it's a work, it's doing the work. You have to find a balancing point. so that you're not being super light worker, peace, love, you know, good vibes only, and you're not hiding from anything that's going to cramp your high vibe style, and also not going too much on the shadow work side either, because I've done that as well too. I've gotten to that point where next thing you know, it's been a couple months and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm now too much consumed in the shadow self, and where did Leslie go? You know, where did that part of you that's, you know, light worker go? So you have to kind of, you know, it's like cooking a recipe. Put a little pinch here, put a little pinch there. You got to learn how to alchemize that. You got to learn how to integrate. And so what it comes down to is this. Once you've experienced both sides, you got to be a filter. You got to like accept what comes in and filter it out. So that is true integration. And the course that I'm working on right now is called Deprogram Your Shadow. And that's what we're going to cover. We're going to cover not only how to deprogram your shadows, but how to carry your light with you along the way. So whether you consider yourself a shadow worker or whether you consider yourself a light worker, it's really about balancing both. You don't want to fall into the extreme of either. And in my opinion, I believe that confronting your shadows on a regular is really important. Not waiting until you collect a shitload of stuff, and then you still have to deal with the unconscious stuff that you're going to unpack along the way once you start doing the shadow work. So just keep it balanced as best you can. Notice when you're tipping over too much one side, too much the other. And it's okay, like you're going to have a week or two where you're way more light, and then you're going to have a week or two where you're way more dark. But don't let it go on too long. Check yourself. Let your higher self kind of guide you, know when it's time to like, all right, we need light, you know, get your light worker self going. But yeah, just an important topic. I don't think it needs to be one versus the other. I don't think that one is particularly better than the other, but I will like to say that I am definitely noticing more of like I sync up a lot more with people who call themselves shadow workers more so these days than people who call themselves light workers these days. I think that a lot of people are getting lost in the whole context of being a light worker, and just can become very superficial. And we will talk about that another time. But yeah, less superficial, less trying to claim one thing. Like we got to stop with thinking it's one title over another, one, you know, the drill, the polarity drill of, you know, one side's better than another. But yes, I hope you got some insight in this video. I totally rambled on, but I think it's important. So why don't you tell me, what are you right now? Are you more of a shadow worker? Are you more of a light worker? And how can you balance that for yourself? If you're new to my channel, please subscribe and leave a comment. Let me know. Please also hit the bell notification because I'm going to be posting a lot more videos. All right, hope you have a beautiful day.